So I want to welcome everyone to the Sierra Club of Pennsylvania Summer Webinar Series. My name is Bill Saby, and I'm a volunteer on the Clean Energy Pennsylvania chapter team. I'm sure we are all well versed in Zoom etiquette by now, but please keep your microphone muted during the presentation. You are invited to add your county in the chat box. I expect we will have a good representation from across the state today. If you have any questions during the presentation, please drop them in the chat. We'll have plenty of time in the second half hour to work through these and maybe even open up things for live discussions. So just as a little context, in February of this year, the Pennsylvania chapter of the Sierra Club formed 8 conservation teams as shown as this diagram. These teams can be viewed in the context of overall sustainability, climate change, and education about these broader topics. Of course, sustainability rests the pillars of people, planet, and profit. And in Pennsylvania, we have a support system of staff and volunteers to help each of our teams with equity, political, outings, and communications assistance, as well as legal assistance. The Clean Energy for All campaign and a bit of grant funding for worthy causes. All 8 of the chapter conservation teams can be found on the Pennsylvania website, where you'll find each team's mission statement, priorities for this year, and all kinds of info on these issue areas developed by our volunteer teams with the help of chapter and national staff. All of our teams have the general mission of looking at the respective issue from a statewide perspective, tracking relevant Pennsylvania policy and legislation, and supporting group and local volunteers working in this space. Richard, you want to talk through the agenda?
Sure. Well, I'm Richard Major, and I'm also a volunteer for the Clean Energy Committee. And we're delighted to have as a speaker tonight, Henry McKay. He's the Pennsylvania Program Director for Solar United Neighbors. And for those who aren't familiar with the firm, it's a nationwide not-for-profit entity that serves the needs and interests of solar owners and supporters across the country. And from the mission statement, they help people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. And I recommend their website. It's interesting and inspiring. So the agenda, Henry's going to cover how community solar works, and the differences from retail and utility scale solar, benefits of community solar for both and landowners, bills pending on community solar, and if enacted, what they would do, and then the value and need for constituents to talk to their electeds about enabling legislation for community solar. So Henry, it's all yours.
Thank you, Richard, and good evening, everyone. As Richard said, my name is Henry McKay, and I'm the Pennsylvania Program Director of Solar United Neighbors, and I'm based here in Pittsburgh. And I'm going to pull up my screen just in a second here. Okay, I hope you all can see that. So I'm going to be talking about community solar in Pennsylvania, what it means, how it works, and what the status is on us making it a reality in Pennsylvania, and also where you come in as voters. So just as a quick overview, I'll cover who Solar United Neighbors is, my organization. We'll talk about what the point of community solar is, what problem is it trying to solve, how it works. We'll talk about the status of community solar bills in the Pennsylvania legislature right now. We'll talk about where you can go to learn more about this issue, get involved, and what you can do to take action to actually help make this a reality in Pennsylvania. And then we'll have some time, should be plenty of time for questions at the end. But before we get into the details, I always find it's helpful to talk about the bottom line up front. So this is my thesis statement for tonight. Community solar brings the benefits of solar energy to everybody. And there are bipartisan bills that are in the General Assembly right now to enact community solar, to legalize it, but they need more support. They're not going to pass themselves. So first, Solar United Neighbors, we are a national 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are, as Richard said, we're here to help people go solar, join together and fight for their energy rights. That means we do a lot of education about solar related issues. That means we do some policy advocacy and grassroots organizing around solar policy issues. And we also help people through the process of going solar. When it's rooftop solar, we have these programs called solar co-ops where we aggregate a bunch of customers, help them get a good deal from a single solar installer. And with community solar in states where it's legal, we run a community solar shopping marketplace to help people make an informed choice about which program they're going to subscribe to. So first, what is community solar? Well, in a nutshell, it's shared solar for those who can't put solar on their own property. The idea is it's not solar, located on your own roof, but it's located off at some other location, and it's a very large array, and a lot of different people can subscribe to a share of that array and reduce their electric bills according to the production of that array. This is a little bit of an aside, but this is a cool picture from the American Solar Grazing Association. It's a great organization, and they're trying to do a lot of education around alternative ways to manage the undergrowth around utility scale solar installations, rather than having gravel or having people bring mowers out there and burn a bunch of gas and risk bumping into the panels. You can have sheep graze amongst the solar panels. They maintain the vegetation so it doesn't grow and shadow the solar panels, and then you have this grazing space for sheep. And it's this nice, it's a form of agrivoltaics combining farming and solar on the same spot. Now, the problem community solar is trying to solve is that really the market for customers for rooftop solar is fairly limited. According to the National Renewable Energy Lab, somewhere around half of the households and businesses across the country cannot do rooftop solar, cannot do solar on their own property. I've read that this number may be even as high as 3/4 in a place like Pennsylvania. So there's a lot of people who, for whatever reason, are just not in the solar market. They can't access it, they can't get those benefits. And that may be because they have an old roof. You don't want to put solar on an old roof that needs to get roof work done on it, because you need to remove it, do the roof work and replace it at some point, and that's expensive. The roof may just be unsuitable. Perhaps it's shaded, perhaps it has too many dormers and antennas and chimneys to really fit solar panels up there in an economical way. Maybe they don't own their home. Maybe someone's a renter. Maybe they live in multifamily housing where their roof is somebody else's floor. Maybe there are local government restrictions prohibiting the installation of solar or making it prohibitive. Maybe they have a homeowners association that likes to block solar installations on their property. Or maybe they just can't afford the upfront cost of solar, even though it's going to save them money in the long term. They can't afford that upfront cost, and maybe they can't access credit because their credit score isn't good enough to afford a loan to pay for solar. So there's a lot of reasons why somebody can't do solar the traditional rooftop net metered way. But solar should be available to everybody. And so that's where community solar comes in. Really, you can think of it as it's solar for everybody who has an electric bill. It means renters can go solar, low-income families can go solar, people with unsuitable roofs, condo residents, people who move around a lot and don't want to wait around for their solar to yield its return on investment. Maybe people who have solar but want some more because they couldn't fit as much to cover all their energy needs, and really anybody else who wants it. So we really want to emphasize the equity benefits of community solar. It broadens. Right now, the residential solar market is really dominated by upper middle class, largely white households, who can afford it, who own homes. But there's a much larger group of people who really need to be lowering their electricity bill. Low-income residents in Pennsylvania, especially residents of color in Pennsylvania, spend a really large share of their income on their utilities. Solar, by lowering your electric utility bill, can dramatically reduce what's called your energy burden. So it really makes solar something that everybody is benefiting from, rather than just those who can do it the traditional rooftop way. Now, community solar is not a new idea. There is enabling legislation for community solar in 19 states plus Washington, D.C. Many more states than that have some kind of community solar projects online, either because a certain utility made them possible, or they didn't need enabling legislation. But you can see Pennsylvania is one of these rare states where we have not a single community solar project, and we don't have the enabling legislation to make it legal to do here. It's not really any limitation of solar technology that's blocking us from doing community solar. It's purely administrative red tape. It's the way our solar net metering regulations are written in Pennsylvania that mean you have to have essentially one solar installation connected to one entity's electric meters. You can't split it up between one solar and a lot of different people's electric meters. So we need to pass a law to make it legal. Now, I want to be clear about what community solar is not. So obviously it's not just solar for a single home, a single customer. It's not solar, so that's rooftop solar. And it's also different in a more subtle way from purchasing renewable energy credits or choosing an alternative electric supplier, or maybe paying a kind of green tariff for utility. So a lot of you probably know you can go to papowerswitch.com in Pennsylvania, and you can choose who your electricity provider is. Your local utility is still your, distributing that electricity to you. You're still their customer, but they're all buying their power from third parties anyway, and they'll just buy it from other third parties if you subscribe to that third party. So you can choose all renewable third party energy provider and have that power your home. But that's different from community solar. In that case, usually what you're doing, you're buying renewable energy credits from an already existing wind or solar project that may not even be in Pennsylvania. It's not additional renewable energy that you're supporting, whereas with community solar, you know that your energy is coming from this particular solar project that was built just to sell energy to you and the other subscribers. And you should know specifically where it is. You should know, where the company who's running it, maybe some things about the land where it's built upon, but you're really tied to a specific project. So it's much more concrete than choosing an alternative supplier. It also should be saving you money. Choosing an alternative supplier can sometimes save you money if you find one of those plans that's cheaper, but community solar really, it creates credits that reduce your electric bill. And that's really the whole point, is you should be saving money and powered by green energy. And oftentimes there are utilities that will have a kind of green tariff where it's basically a special price you can pay, and they say they'll source your energy from a renewable source. Usually that special price is really just a higher price. So with that, it's also kind of fuzzy whether are you really making it possible for more solar to be out there, or are you just kind of buying a new product from a utility? But with community solar, it really is about, that's new solar you're helping fund, and you have a specific project you're tied to, and it's saving you money. So how does this work? So this diagram is a good summary of it. So you'll have a solar panel facility, usually located, far away from the subscribers. The way the law in Pennsylvania, the bill in Pennsylvania that we're supporting works is the solar facility has to be in the same utility service area as all the subscribers. So, but it could also be, fairly close to them. But you have a solar panel facility, it sends its electricity into the grid. That utility then resells that electricity, crediting the bills of the subscribers of that community. So those people who opt in to subscribing to that community solar facility. So they get a credit on their bill that reduces it, and then they make some kind of payments to the community solar facility that help finance that facility. So usually, I think now the most common business model is, as a subscriber, you'll pay a set monthly fee. Maybe it's pegged to 10 or 15% lower than utility prices. Maybe it's the same thing each month. Although there's other models where you kind of, you pay a large amount upfront to, buy like a share of that solar array or maybe you pay a fixed monthly fee. There's a lot of business models out there, but you're paying somehow, and you should be receiving more savings than you're paying. So you're saving on net. Yeah, I already talked about this. So in the pay monthly per kilowatt hour model, that's the most common. Sometimes it's a fixed amount, sometimes it escalates over time. That's an important thing to know when you're signing up. You want to make sure it doesn't go up faster than your utility prices go up, or maybe it's at a set percentage below the utility rate. Now, at Solar United Neighbors, we have a lot of opinions about community solar. It can be a slippery term. It's easy. It's kind of susceptible to a kind of greenwashing where, often you'll get a lot of things called community solar that we wouldn't really consider community solar. But we believe that good community solar must first offer tangible economic benefits to the subscribers. So the subscribers should be able to save money by participating. It should be customer friendly. So no unnecessary obstacles, hidden charges when you sign up, or confusing rules. It should be portable, so you should allow customers to move within that utility area and keep their subscription without having to go through the whole thing to sign up again. And it should provide benefits to the community beyond just the energy itself. So things like job creation, of course, grid resilience when you're putting more solar on the grid, especially when it's close to where the people using it. You're making a more resilient grid that's more resistant to power outages. Community solar projects should have substantial ways that low-income subscribers can participate, because the benefits are often greatest for them by being able to reduce their electric payments. And there are landowner benefits as well. So of course, the landowner who's usually leasing their land to a community solar developer, they're earning reliable lease payments, somewhere in the range of $800 to $1,000 per acre per year. So this can be a great way for farmers to take some of their more marginal land, put it into productive use, and help keep the farm in business. Provide really reliable revenue while providing renewable energy to their community. There's also some interesting things emerging, like pollinator-friendly solar. You can see this picture here from Minnesota. This is a beekeeper who's brought their bees to a pollinator-friendly solar array. Rather than just turf grass being planted around the solar panels, they plant native wildflowers and grasses. They do a better job of things like managing groundwater, and they provide pollinator habitat. And so you can bring your bees there, and they pollinate from amongst the solar panels, and they sell that honey as solar honey. And then there was a brewery, I think, in Minnesota that took some of that honey and sold it as a solar beer. So you get these interesting value add agricultural products coming out of it. So there's a lot of interesting things you can do that go beyond just the energy that it's providing. So most community solar projects are something like this. It's a big array out in the field. Usually it's in a rural area because there's open land and it's cheaper. And the subscribers could be from rural or urban areas. But it doesn't have to be like this. It can also be something like this. So this is a multifamily housing facility in Washington, D.C., where they also have community solar. And regular rooftop solar for multifamily housing can be kind of tricky because usually there's not one roof per resident. The roofs are shared, so you have to figure out how you're going to connect this to everybody's meters. It's a lot of interconnection costs. It's really complex. Sometimes it doesn't even work if it's a master metered building. But with community solar, you can have this tied to everybody's individual electric account and, kind of virtually, like they're just the subscribers for the community solar array. So community solar, the solar doesn't always have to exist far away from where the subscribers are. And I think this is really where the most exciting projects are. Things like a community center or a church having some extra space, building a community solar array, and selling the subscriptions to members of the community. It really opens the door for more people-powered solar projects where you have grassroots control over the energy system. Now, this offers benefits, of course, to subscribers. You're saving money, you're being able to support solar, it's easier to access solar, and it offers benefits, as I said, to the landowners. You're earning these steady lease payments, you're putting some marginal land to protective use. Maybe you're also doing cool things like providing pollinator habitat or grazing land. And this is really, I want to emphasize this is one of these unique energy policies in Pennsylvania that can really unite rural and urban supporters. This issue legislatively in Pennsylvania has support of a lot of environmentalist groups, but also has support of the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau because they see the opportunity this presents to Pennsylvania farms. Now I want to talk about what is going on in the legislature with community solar. So first, before I get into the bills right now, there have been past efforts and past sessions to pass community solar. Most notably last year, there was a bill HB 531 in the House. It garnered a lot of co-sponsors, Republican and Democrat. A lot of unlikely bedfellows were involved. You had urban, very progressive representatives. You had coal country representatives. You had people like Jim Struzzi, who is the state rep for Indiana County. He's leading the opposition to the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI. So he's no typical supporter of climate or environmental regulation, but he was a co-sponsor of community solar. So it really was this big tent at the Farm Bureau. It had groups like the Sierra Club supporting it. It unfortunately did not pass because we got unlucky with the committee chair in the House Consumer Affairs Committee. He wouldn't let anything through. But now we have a new chair in that committee, so we have a new opportunity this year. And this year, there's actually a few different bills. I want to focus on these two right now. There's a Senate version, SB 472. It would enable community solar. Subscribers would get fairly modest bill credits. It's bipartisan, and it's in the Senate Consumer Protection and Professional Licensure Committee. A few months after SB 472, the House version came out with some updates. That's HB 1555. Also enables community solar. It's similar in a lot of ways, but improves a little bit upon SB 472 in terms of specifically. So under both of these bills, the developers of a community solar project, the revenue they earn, one, it comes from subscriber subscriptions, of course, but also through something called the grid services payment. So the idea is when you're interconnecting solar to the grid, it provides a lot of benefits beyond the energy itself, some resiliency benefits I talked about. It's energy that can essentially save the grid as a whole money in a few different ways. And they wanted to monetize that somehow. So this grid services payment is something that the electric utilities would pay the community solar developers per kilowatt of community solar that gets built. And then the utilities then go and take that payment from, gather that revenue from ratepayers. HB 1555 reduced the size of that grid services payment a little bit, and it also made it so that developers couldn't get it until they showed that they had 70% of their projects subscribed, at least. So it's making sure that if you're going to get this nice incentive, you're going to be actually serving people. You're going to have people subscribe. So we saw that as an improvement in consumer protection terms. So Solar United Neighbors, this HB 1555, this is what we are supporting this session. And that is in the House Consumer Affairs Committee. That now the chair of that committee, Representative Jim Marshall, he was a sponsor of the community solar bill last session last year. So we're optimistic that he would support this one as well. Yeah, this is stuff I already said a little bit. So what we like about this bill is very bipartisan. It was introduced by Republicans. It has Democratic supporters. It has protections for consumers in there, which is important. It has extra protections for low-income consumers. You can't charge them any upfront or sign-on fees. The subscriber credits are a little low value compared to what they were last year in HB 531. You don't get full retail rate credit for your subscription. You get reduced the price to compare credit. So you can't offset your entire bill, just a portion of your bill. But there is potential for them to be increased when there's a recalculation of the credits 5 years after the program starts. Those community solar developers earn money from this grid services payment, which I talked about. It's 18 cents per watt. And we do think that small community-led projects like the one I talked about on the roofs of the multifamily housing might have trouble meeting the requirements in this community solar bill. It's really geared towards larger projects. So that's something we're hoping to see improve, so you can have more grassroots community solar projects. Now, there's some other bills that look kind of like community solar in the legislature, but aren't. Namely, there's this one, HB 1161. This is introduced by the Republican State Rep Lori Mizgorski from Allegheny County. It would allow utilities to contract developers to build large solar installations. And then the utility would then sell the subscriptions to those customers at what is most likely a premium price. So it kind of feels like community solar, but you're not actually going to be saving any money likely doing this. You're just paying a different price for your, that's likely higher for your subscription. And it's really not that much different from retail choice that we have already. So you can already go on papowerswitch.com and you can, pay for a subscription to an alternative provider, maybe one that has solar in Pennsylvania. So it's not really clear what benefits this is bringing, but somehow it got voted out of the committee it was in. It's now on the House floor awaiting third and final consideration. Nothing happened to it before the House went on recess. And we'll see what happens when they come back in the fall. But this is just, not real community solar. Now, there's a lot more to learn about community solar, especially when you get in the details of how actual projects work. We have a very detailed, comprehensive community solar guide available on our website. If you go to solarunitedneighbors.org/community solar, there's a lot of great resources there that I recommend if you want to go deep on this issue. And I also recommend taking action. So this is a bipartisan bill, but as it's probably not a surprise to you, any kind of solar bill has an uphill battle in Pennsylvania. It doesn't have as powerful organized a lobby as it does as other energy sources do. So our elected officials really need to hear from people all over the Commonwealth about why this issue is important and why they need to pass it now. So I urge you to talk to your state representative, ask them to co-sponsor HB 1555. It'd be really great if over this summer recess, we could build up the list of co-sponsors of this bill, put a lot of momentum behind it, so when they come back in September, they're ready to pass it. I'm going to stick a link to our action alert in the chat here. Oops, sorry, I just lost it. I'm going to have to grab it for you again. That's just a tool on our website that will help you send an email right to your state representative urging them to support this bill. And that's it. So I'm happy to take any questions anyone has. And Richard, I think, are you going to look through the chat and pull some out? Richard, you're muted.
Yes, there are a couple in the chat. One, you mentioned the community solar developer. Who or what is that? And are they the ones who organize the project and get it done?
Yeah, so they're solar developers. They're all over the country. They tend to focus on larger projects. So they're usually a different company that will do like rooftop solar installations. But they're usually the instigators here. So they find a market they want to work in. They identify land they think will be good for a community solar project. Usually that means it's open, it's relatively flat, it's sunny, and it's close to the distribution, the electrical grid, so it's easy to get that power to market. They'll approach a landowner and they'll negotiate. Usually they start with a lease option, so the option to turn it into a lease at some point, where they're going to be paying lease payments to the landowner and then selling the energy subscriptions. And actually, this is happening a lot already. There's a lot of developers from all over the country who are buying up lease options all around Pennsylvania in anticipation of this bill passing. There's a huge backlog of projects that are ready to go once we pass this.
That's encouraging. And you mentioned smaller community-driven community solar projects. Where does one, leave off and the bigger ones begin?
You know, I'm not really sure if there's a hard and fast cutoff between one or the other. The way we've been thinking about it is we're thinking of small projects as something under 500 kilowatts, and then the bigger ones, going up to 5 megawatts. Just to put that in perspective, a typical residential solar installation is something like 8 kilowatts. So 500 kilowatts is still pretty large. That's a whole lot of homes it can power.
Okay. And once a community solar facility is installed and up and running, can they add new subscribers, or does that have to wait for a staged expansion of some sort?
Yeah, so there's usually a lot of churn in the subscribers. People are falling off. They're adding new people. So I don't know how often community solar projects are fully subscribed. So usually they're expecting to sell, most of them, and they're always doing work to get new subscribers.
Okay. One person would ask, the term microgrid, how does that relate to community-driven, community-led community solar?
Well, it's distinct from it. So microgrid is where you have like kind of an isolatable section of the grid. Maybe it's for a university campus or a hospital campus where it's multiple buildings linked together.
Mhm.
That have local on-site energy generation, maybe local on-site energy storage, and they're able to operate as their own thing, but maybe spend most of the time connected to the rest of the grid. So it's not necessary to have for community solar, because you can have these vast distances between the solar and the subscribers in the case of community solar.
I see. And is there a typical offset that people see to their electrical supply charge when they participate?
It really varies by market, and we'll see how it turns out in Pennsylvania, because this grid services payment that the developers get is a pretty new thing. I think they kind of have something like it in Illinois, but it hasn't been out for very long there. So we don't exactly know how that's going to affect things. But in a market like Maryland, you're usually seeing 5 to 15% savings on your electric bill, depending on the project.
Okay, thank you. And I just had a chat from Bill Saby saying that we'll take live questions. I guess, are we taking them off, people off mute?
Actually, after you finish the red questions, so once you finish the chat, Richard.
Okay, thank you. Let's scan through here. And when people do participate and they get to offset against their electrical bill, is that only for supply, or does that actually offset part distribution as well?
It depends on how the law is written. So in Pennsylvania, the way the bill is written is the credits you get are valued at the price to compare rate. So that's basically the supply side of your bill. And I'm not sure though, if you subscribe to enough, could those price to compare credits eventually cover your whole bill, or if it only covers the supply part of your generation. I'm not sure how that works.
Okay, Pico's not going to owe me money.
No, you wouldn't get the dramatic savings you get with like rooftop solar, where you might even get a check at the end of the year for a little bit of excess energy.
Okay. And these the arrays typically are in rural areas. And how big are they, and what do they do for landowners other than, or do they do anything for landowners other than the lease payments?
Typically it's just the lease payments, and then the idea is the landowner is only, they're not responsible for anything else. The developer handles the maintenance of that space, and also the cleanup of it at the end of the life of the array. They're taking it all out of the ground and returning the land to its original state. So what the developer gets out of it is they put some land to use, and they have reliable income that comes from it, rather than just whatever corn or dairy prices happen to be at that time.
Okay. And one of the benefits of community solar is said to be jobs creation, which I guess helps account for the bipartisan support. But where do those jobs come from, and what sort of jobs are they typically?
Well, it's with community solar, it's a lot of construction jobs, so mostly upfront. Right, there's not a lot of ongoing jobs. The maintenance of an existing community solar facility is a fair, really not labor intensive. It's not surprising. And they come from wherever those developers are. Now, unfortunately, a lot of these developers aren't Pennsylvania developers, because why would you have a company here start a utility or a community scale solar development business when we don't have much of a market here? So this is something other states are reaping the benefits of being early movers in solar by building up that infrastructure, that bench of solar development companies. We don't have as many of those here because we've let other people steal our thunder in solar in a lot of ways. But I do want to emphasize, the really job intensive part of the solar industry is residential. Those are, it's just more jobs per kilowatt you put up. And those are jobs that you can't outsource. They are more likely to be local. There's a company that's probably in your region who's doing it. The people who are doing your installation live in your area. So it's just the real jobs driver in the solar world is residential rooftop solar.
I see. Okay. Here's a question with an acronym. Maybe you would know what it is. Who actually owns the RECs produced by the community solar projects? REC?
Yeah, the renewable energy credits. Okay. So in Pennsylvania, you build some kind of renewable energy like solar, and you can sell the energy, but you also get a separate revenue stream from selling the solar renewable energy credits. Every time you generate 1,000 kilowatt hours, you earn one SREC. You can do that for your rooftop solar, and you do it with utility scale solar. So this is another thing that depends on how the law is written. It might be that the developers keep the RECs and they get to sell them, make some money from it. It might be that the utility gets the RECs and they get to count them towards their compliance requirements or sell them themselves if they don't need that. And I'm not actually sure how HB 1555 does it, but often those go to the utility.
Okay.
They definitely don't go to the subscriber.
Okay. Here's a question. Is there anything comparable to a community wind system?
I don't see why not, but I haven't heard of it before. That's an interesting question.
That's a good question. That's about what we have in the queue here.
Well, I see a question here. How is the intermittency of solar handled in community solar? So because it's connected to the grid, it doesn't really matter. So the subscriber, you're still getting power from the grid, even if it's nighttime. So it doesn't matter when that solar is generating energy. It's just like if you have rooftop solar, you're still connected to the grid. You always have electricity, whether it's coming from your solar or whether it's coming from the grid. And because we have such low solar penetration in Pennsylvania, only around 0.5% of our energy is coming from solar, that intermittency is not an issue yet. As when we get to higher levels of solar penetration, we need to really start thinking about more storage coming online to manage that intermittency. Also things like managing the electricity demand. So moving electricity usage to times when there's low demand. Maybe things like charging your electric car at night, or charging an electric car at home when you have solar panels and it's energy is coming from the sun. Okay, that's a good question.
I missed a question. Did this one about the microgrid question and better grid stability get answered?
I think we did get the microgrid question, right?
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that.
Maybe not the nuance you're asking. I'm scrolling through here.
Okay, so I think we can open it up for live questions. If anyone who wants to could raise their hand. In your menus, your Zoom menu, if you float your cursor over your screen, you should see a menu that has reactions. If you pop up reactions, you'll see there's a raise hand button. And if you don't mind, we'd like to keep these questions to community solar specifically. and not just general statements, if you don't mind. So if anybody wants to raise their hand, if anybody has a question, let me bring that up, sorry.
I'll ask a question since I live in Philadelphia. Are there instances of community solar having installations in urban areas? You know, what might be unreclaimed land, like where there might be former industrial wasteland?
Yeah, I mean, the one I know off the top of my head now is that example I had in DC of the multifamily housing facility hosting a community solar array and then sharing the energy with the residents. There's a lot of interesting opportunities for urban brownfields to be redeveloped into solar and then selling subscriptions locally for the energy. So those tend to be less profitable projects because urban land is just more expensive, and there may be, especially with brownfields, there's often some remediation work that needs to be done first before you can do something else there. So those aren't often what the developers are trying to do first. They want that cheap land out in the field in the countryside. But that's where these kind of community-led solar projects come in, where people see, they want to develop something local, they want it to have multiple benefits, and they'll accept maybe a higher cost for it in exchange for those things.
Well, if a local group wanted to facilitate a community-led solar effort, where would they go for guidance?
They would have to find a developer to build the project, likely some kind of solar consultant to help guide the process. We have a good webinar on growing your own community solar on our Solar United Neighbors YouTube channel that I recommend, that gets into the details of that.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 3 questioners in the queue. Let me ask Karen to unmute.
Hi, I just moved to Pennsylvania from Wisconsin, where we have cooperative solar, where different residents can get together and split the cost of solar to augment their use of grid solar, or grid energy. Sorry, is that something that's included in these bills that are being proposed in Pennsylvania, or is that an entirely separate issue?
Oh, that's interesting. I'm not familiar with that idea, but that sounds really cool. But it would be different from what these bills in Pennsylvania are doing. Although I'm trying to think if something like that would work. I think probably not, because as I said, these bills are geared for a large scale community solar, a large scale solar project, rather than just a few neighbors kind of sharing the cost of doing it.
Is that helpful, Karen?
Yeah, thanks. I'm working on a project. My organization is working on a project where we are providing information about renewable energy on homesteads and considering solar and looking into the different legalities and things. And one of the things we've been thinking about is this cooperative model. So I was just wondering if that was something that was being already pushed by anyone or not.
Yeah, there's a great organization in Pennsylvania called the Clean Energy Co-op. I think it's a little different what you're explaining, but basically it's kind of community financed solar installations, and they take a lot of different approaches, but basically they're trying to get over the problem of the big upfront costs, and also the problem that not everyone can benefit from the main solar incentive, the federal tax credit, because you need a tax bill, to reduce. So if you're like a church, you can't benefit from that. But I recommend the website. They're called the Clean Energy Co-op, and they have a interesting model that you might be able to learn from.
Thanks.
Okay, Alan, I'll ask you to unmute.
Hi there. Thank you. I've been studying up on solar probably for over a year. It's been a really steep learning curve, from everything from the federal level with NREL down to Pennsylvania, and obviously reading about the bills and listening to all the conversation. And to me, it strikes me that community solar or whatever we end up doing is really a business development effort. I mean, just even for 1 megawatt, community solar 1 megawatt, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars of solar panels, not even talking about inverters, wiring and labor and all this sort of thing. So it's really a business development effort. And I don't think anybody's going to build these things unless it's clear what the income stream is and how reliable this is going to be. And obviously that requires the legislation and friendly tariffs. PECO is not going to do any particular favors for anybody here unless it's written in as to how the behavior occurs. So I'm somewhat disappointed at what I think the progress is here. I've seen other states. We obviously all know about how California and the southern states are going. And now my phone is ringing off the hook. I've got about 100 acres here in Chester County, and I'm getting calls from companies in France, and other companies that just think I'm unsophisticated. I'm an unsophisticated farmer and just want to get me to sign anything. And I think there's, we're all tired of the spam phone calls. Now we're getting the spam solar calls, and something's wrong. There's fundamentally something wrong with how this is all playing out. If they think that this is going to benefit us, developing solar. So I'm concerned that community solar isn't helping either in terms of this. Now, for example, Exelon owns PECO. So Teddy Roosevelt was a trust buster and said the oil companies can't own railroads. Well, Exelon owns the transmission facility in Chester County. So I don't understand how we're all going to get any level of success if Exelon owns the transmission facilities and we're looking to use those transmission facilities for community solar. Microgrid just involves intelligence on the grid. Community solar is like, give us the grid. And I don't understand how we're going to take possession of this issue in Pennsylvania if we don't have the alignment of the interests that want to invest in this, that at our level, at the small level. So for 5 megawatts community solar, you're talking, over $1 million worth of solar panels. This isn't a casual investment for anybody, even for farmers who want to give up GMO corn or don't want to do regular crops. This is a serious investment. So I'm interested in starting a company doing this, getting equity involved and this sort of thing. But I need to know that I can end up on people's retail bills and get retail pricing. So I don't see how solar can survive, community level or not, without retail pricing, SRECs, RECs, whatever all that is. That's a completely different market that doesn't guarantee any return to solar businesses. So we need to see retail. And PECO buys at wholesale, sells at retail. Solar project, community or otherwise, need retail pricing guaranteed at some minimum level. And
well, if I could jump in, I totally agree. Retail pricing from the consumer's perspective too is the best way to do it, because it also puts it kind of on parity with rooftop solar. It can be done without it. And from the developer's perspective, the way the bill is written in Pennsylvania with this grid services payment, it's guaranteed. It's 18 cents per watt per year for 5 years. So it's income you're going to get, and it actually pencils out to be enough to pay for the project within a few years. So it makes them less reliant on the subscription revenue, which is very uncertain. You correctly point out. So I think this, from what we hear from the industry, this could create a community solar program that they would want to build into. Yeah, but you're right. You got to get the law right to get the market right for everybody. And just as a landowner who's being approached by developers, remember they have a lot more information than you do. It's not a level playing field, and And I, highly recommend having your own legal representation. And the Penn State Extension has been doing a lot of great webinars on this topic of how to lease your land for solar and not get screwed. They have a lot of great resources on it. I recommend that.
I would never touch land lease with any of these folks, and the lawyers are $400 an hour. So you really need to be a savvy business person here. I'm concerned the community solar isn't savvy enough to deal with the industry on this. And by the way, I just wanted to say, I was the chair of the Sierra Club in New York City in the 1990s, and I wish we could have had an issue like this come up at that time, so that we could have had solar, all along this time. But the Sierra Club, you talk about approaching legislatures and telling them, what your interest. Can you say specifically how you think we could help either Sierra Club members or voting citizens? What is it that's going to sell this? I mean, just phone calls doesn't really work anymore, does it?
I think it still does help, even if you have like a very democratic state representative who this is an easy sell for them. Building up that bank of co-sponsors helps. Building up the bank of Republican co-sponsors helps. They operate by a version of the Hastert rule here in Pennsylvania. They're not going to move something unless it has a majority of the majority support. But really, probably the key is farms, is showing strong support from Pennsylvania farms because they have a lot of political capital.
And I don't want to take from anybody else who's got more questions, but where the farmers, we're disappearing, and we don't have legislative clout necessarily. And the businesses are losing their sources of revenue and income. Although I was out in Lancaster recently, there's still some farms in Amish and large and so forth. A lot of opportunity for solar there, bigger than what I could even possibly do. But this doesn't seem to be a newsworthy item. I don't see, all the other items we'd rather not hear about around the news. Nothing really about this.
I would love to see more news coverage of this too.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I'll unmute, ask Willett to unmute.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Steve Willett, Amarex Energy Services is the company that I work for. And we're very much involved in private solar projects throughout PJM and Pennsylvania in particular. I'm based in Chester County. You asked some very good questions there, Alan. And as far as the business aspect of community solar is concerned, it will take care of itself. The reason I asked about who owns the RECs, the renewable energy credits, is because those credits are selling at around $30 a megawatt hour, or 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So that in itself is to incentivize the development of solar projects in general, and something that the developers have very much got their eye on and are taking advantage of. We as a company, our parent company, Cantor Fitzgerald, is actually an investment banker for many of these large renewable projects. And we actually just sold the output from a large 18 megawatt project in Pennsylvania. So I'm not so familiar with the community solar project, and I joined the webinar tonight to focus on that and not necessarily the bigger picture where I'm involved in. Although I have knowledge as far as New York's concerned and New Hampshire's concerned in terms of their particular community solar program, which is interesting in terms of New York, for example. If you're a subscriber, you need to sign for a 20-year term, and you can actually get around about a 10% discount off both the distribution and off the supply side of things. So it doesn't sound, as Henry said, it sounds as though, state to state set their own rules in terms of, the benefits there. But at the end of the day, the big benefit from community solar, as it strikes me, is that the little guy can
Steve.
actually get the benefit of the community solar rather than the bigger players in the market.
Steve, sorry, I had to mute you. Can I ask you to ask a question? I have to wrap up here in a minute. Henry has to leave right at 8:30. You'll have to unmute yourself, Steve.
Sorry about that. What term does a subscriber need to sign a contract for on entering one of these, a community solar engagement?
There's a lot of variation in how it works. I mean, obviously, we think shorter terms is better because that means more flexibility for the consumer. The HB 1555, the bill in Pennsylvania, doesn't specify that. So it depends on the project itself.
Right. Oh, okay.
If you want to see kind of a cross section of actual community solar subscription terms, I can put a link here in a second. But on our website for for Maryland, we have a community solar shopping marketplace, and you can see what this project's terms are. This one. We have it for Minnesota and Colorado too, as well, to see some different markets. I'll find.
Yeah, if you could put that that link on there, Henry, that would be great. Just one more quick question. What actual claims does a subscriber have? If they sign a community solar contract, do they have any claims? Because essentially they're buying power from the grid just the same as conventional power.
Right, you're still just a customer. There is a model where you own something, but I think that's pretty rare. So really, you have no ownership claim to anything when you subscribe. Yeah. And I just put that link in the chat here.
Thanks, Steve. I have to wrap up. So this is thank you all for joining us today, and thanks to our presenters. This was a really great session. There are a couple of important websites I encourage you to engage with your local Sierra Club group. Find your group in the Get Involved section of the chapter website. We'll be following up with a link to the recording of this session and any notes that we put together. We'll also invite you to check one of our upcoming clean energy team meetings. Please be on the lookout for that. And I really appreciate everybody's attendance today. This was a terrific session. Do you have any last comments, Henry, that you want to leave us with? I know you have to run to a meeting. Feel free to depart when you need to.
Well, thank you to the Sierra Club for hosting me. I love talking about community solar, and I want to do it to as many people as possible. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Very informative webinar. Appreciate this. Thanks all. We'll get the recording back out to you all. Thank you.